From We Run With You, I'm Kathy Wynn.
And I'm Rob Alvarez. This is Doing Good. This season, we interview brain aneurysm survivors and caregivers to learn how they are navigating new challenges and finding their own way of doing good.
Cheryl Blacklock had a successful corporate career in finance when she suffered 5 brain aneurysms. She traversed many crossroads in her path to not only survive, but also thrive. Cheryl eventually found herself out of the office and into an art studio, which for her has become the right place to be. Hi, Cheryl. Welcome to our podcast, Doing Good. How are you?
Hi. Good. Thank you for having me. Very humbled. Very humbled.
Yeah, I am so excited to talk to you about so many different things. I definitely want to get to, your experience as a brain aneurysm survivor, your 5 aneurysms. I want to hear more about that and your craniotomy. But before we get into any of that, I wanted to kind of take it back and ask you maybe if you could tell us what life was like before your aneurysms.
So I'm an accountant and I had a very busy corporate life, leaving first thing in the morning, home late in the evening sort of thing, constantly worrying about my clients and my workload. And also I was a mentor for our younger accountants in the firm. I also did training for our clients in software. I helped develop different software and train them in that use. So I was and then I was one of the directors. He was my direct boss, and I was basically like his right-hand man, if you know what I mean. So I had his big clients. We were only business only, financial clients, and I basically took care of them for him. So I was constantly to the point where not many holidays. And if I did, I was still thinking about my job. But I loved my job. Like, that was my life. I loved interacting with all the younger accountants and seeing them come up. And I just loved it. Absolutely loved it. And I just loved the whole computing of accounting, the whole, maths behind it. And the only time, ironically, 2018, we decided to go on a cruise to Singapore. So for 2 weeks, I had no phone, no contact with anybody. So it was actually the first real holiday I'd had in years where I was completely cut off from my job and my life. Outside of work, I've got one daughter. She's now 32, I think.
Yes, you look way too young to have a 32.
I know. I did not know that.
Your old daughter.
And she's just, she's actually doing a master's before her PhD at the moment. So she's sort of on her little journey. So we only have one child and a couple of cats. And so basically it was pretty quiet. We live in a little seaside village here on the east coast of Australia. So we're just around the corner from the beach, and we have like a little beach cottage. And so life was pretty, gardening and all of that kind of stuff outside of work. So pretty quiet there. We, do a lot of camping and, all that sort of thing. But yeah, I was pretty hectic as far as my work life goes. And ironically, again, I had started a running regime probably in the 12 months leading up to 2019, where I was sort of running 3 to 6 Ks a day, either on my running machine or, here I live in a place called Bonny Hills, so by default it's just all hills. So running is a real, if you want to get a good training, you just pick the biggest hill. But yeah, so I was doing that, and I was really pushing myself to the limits there, if you know what I mean. Like, you probably understand that, where you're just really, really pushing that fitness to the limit, if I can sort of put it that way. So, but yeah, other than that, life was pretty good.
Well, why do you think that was? Did you have a certain goal in mind with running?
Well, We had been on the cruise, and to keep fit on there, they have a the ship was quite large, so it had quite a couple of k's of running track, and people would get up there running, and then they had this amazing gymnasium. So I decided I just wandered up there one day. And before I knew it, I was up there every morning, and then I'd go up in the afternoon, and then you've got the pools for swimming, and I was doing that. And so when I got home, I was like, oh, let's buy a running machine and let's go and do this, this, and this. So I just sort of gradually, having said that, I'd probably, run a really hard few Ks in the morning before work in the dark, and then I'd be having coffee, not doing anything healthy after it, if you know what I mean. And then racing to work into the stress. So it was kind of, I wasn't giving my body time to sort of wind down after that. But, I don't know. It was just a real push and I felt great. I'd actually posted photos, like, this is great, new year in 2019. And, kind of went downhill after that.
I did not know. What a treat. I did not know that you had picked up running and got pretty intense with it. I'd like to say that
running.
maybe you got addicted a little bit when you got on the cruise. Yeah. But that's great, I mean, if anything, there's
Absolutely.
there's worse things to be addicted to. But yeah, that's so cool. Something new that I just found out about you.
I need to do more now, but it's kind of getting back into a track now. So body's not quite what it was.
So can you take us to the day you found out you had the brain aneurysm or brain aneurysms? And
I can. I was at work, and we have little offices that kind of don't have walls that go to this like partition type walls. And my boss works next to me, and he kind of called out, hey Shazza, that's what he called me. And I swung my chair around really hard and fast, and I kind of swung my head at the same time, and I felt my neck kind of give a bit, and I just kind of yelled out in pain. It was so horrific. Then I saw stars. I wanted to pass out, and I felt like vomiting, and I was kind of like, whoa, so people started rushing heat packs and Panadols to me and all sorts of things, and I'm like, no, I'll soldier on. I'll be fine. So I sat at my desk because I had a big job I was on at that time, and I sat there for probably a couple of hours trying to process some data, and I kept thinking, this is not right. I just felt kind of a bit off kilter, a bit dizzy, nauseous, that kind of thing. And I thought, maybe I need to go home. And I had this overwhelming desire to put my head on my desk and fall asleep. And so I said to the girls at the office, I said, I'm just going to duck up to the hospital and just get a quick check on my neck, and I'll be back in half an hour. And so I went up, and I got in my car and I drove. And on the way to the hospital, I kind of like to tell this story because it's a bit like, that whole serendipitous thing, like, and Crossroads. If you didn't do that, this wouldn't have happened. Or if you had have done that, something else might have happened. And I do actually literally get to a crossroads when I'm on the way to the hospital, and the left way goes to my house and straight ahead goes to the hospital. And I literally sat at the traffic lights going, I just need to go home and have a rest. I'll be fine. I can go back to work tomorrow. And then all of a sudden I had this wave of nausea, and I thought, oh no, I think I maybe should go straight ahead. And I made the decision to go straight ahead. And I don't know what your hospital system's like in America, but ours is like, if you go to emergency, it could be 10, 12 hours later that you're sort of seen. It's, it can sometimes be a bit of a chore. We have a hospital that's situated on the top of a hill. So to get to it, you have to really, it feels like walk 2 Ks to get to it up a hill from the car park. There's never any car park. So I'm kind of saying to myself, if I don't get a car park, I'm going home. So I drove in, and this lady literally drove out right next to the door. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's a sign. So I went in. And then I thought, well, I'm not waiting here all day because I just want to go home. And when I went in, there was not a soul in the emergency room. I walked straight in. And I sort of explained what happened, and then this young doctor came. And the luck of it was this doctor. If I didn't get this doctor, I still think I wouldn't know. Like I wouldn't have, who knows what would have happened. But he said to me, we have to do a scan on your neck to check for an arterial dissection because of your symptoms. But I'm going to do a brain scan because he said I work from the worst case scenario backwards instead of the other way, like all the rest of the doctors do, where you're sort of going up and up. He said, I'm going to go worst case scenario first. And I went, oh, knock yourself out. So I went and had a CT, I think, from memory with the dye and what have you.
Yeah.
And thinking, I really need to get back to work. I told these girls half an hour. And then next thing I know, all these people were wheeling me into the resus unit. I had all these nurses around me holding my hand, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I don't know if you ever had that moment a doctor's talking to you, and all of a sudden it sounds like their voice is underwater going blah, 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 blah. I couldn't grasp what he was saying because he started saying, we've got some lesions and we have some... I forget what he called aneurysms, but they weren't aneurysms. They were, I don't know, like bubbles or, whatever. He's describing all these anatomical things in my brain, and I'm kind of not understanding what he was saying. And I looked at the nurse and she's patting my hand. I'm thinking, I don't think this is very good. I said, can you tell me that again? And he said, we found a number of abnormalities in your brain. We need to send you to what's called John Hunter Hospital, which is basically 2 hours away from here, and it's our huge hospital where you go if you're flown there by helicopter if you have a car accident or a stroke or a heart attack or something. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay. And we're taking you to ICU now. Can you please call your husband? But we don't want to panic him, but we need him to bring you some supplies. And I'm thinking, well, you don't know my husband. As soon as I say I'm in hospital and need supplies, he's going to panic.
Yeah.
So the longest half an hour of my life, I think, was laying in this resus unit, waiting to go to ICU, wondering if I would make it to see my husband, and thinking, I never said goodbye to my mom or my daughter, or, like that, just that half hour where you're in that no man's land where you don't know what's going on, but you know that it's really serious and you could die from it. So that was really, really, really overwhelming. That kind of makes me feel funny saying it. But eventually they got there. We went to ICU. I was sent to this John Hunter. I was down there. I had then the femoral angiograms. And the journey went from there, basically. So that was my initial day. That was my first day.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, certainly like most people say, certainly there was someone watching over you, but definitely there was, I don't know
The
what it
universe,
is.
yeah,
Yeah,
was taking care of me.
everything aligned just like
Yeah,
how it was meant to be for you that day.
I think so.
Yeah,
Because in
and I think, well, in my situation, you were conscious, right? In my
yes,
situation, I I was just out, and I don't
yes.
remember anything. So I never got that flood of feeling like, "Oh my gosh, this is so
What's going on?
serious." Like, but my
Yeah,
my
yeah.
kids and my husband, it
Yes,
was more my husband going through all of the
exactly.
waves of
Yeah.
emotions. But like you, I think, of course, and I still do it now a lot. I always am thinking, what if, because with
Yeah,
me, what if my father didn't ask me to take him to brunch? I would have, like
yeah,
you, how you wanted to go home and go to sleep, or lay on,
yeah,
just put
yeah,
your head down at your desk and take a nap.
yep,
That was me. I just wanted to go to sleep, take a nap,
mm,
because we were
mm,
supposed to go home the next day. But
Wow.
anyhow, no, so I absolutely get it, and that yeah, that's, and the
I
gosh,
think, yeah, I
that's
think
just incredible that the doctor took
I
that
know,
initiative
I
too.
know. Because from my perspective, it was the last thing I was expecting to hear. Um, because I was one of those people that really rarely went to the doctor
Mm,
unless I was really desperate. Um, I was always putting off, doing any of that. My daughter would say to me, Mum, you're 55, because back then I was 55. And she's like, you need to go and do these tests and, get your breast screening and your this and your that. And so I'd actually reluctantly done all of that, ironically,
Mm.
about 3 months beforehand. And I got the all clear for everything. I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I'm
mm,
fine. And I think, too, that day was just so overwhelming. I mean, I had to have those spinal taps where they take the fluid out of your spine.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
oh,
and I was in ICU. They did it that night about 11 o'clock, and the doctor sort of saying, I heard one of the nurses saying he doesn't do it very often, and I'm thinking, oh
oh
my
my god.
goodness. And literally, yeah, it did. The room was very quiet for a long time because he couldn't get the right spot in my spine, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Anyway, that was a bit of an ordeal. That was a
Mm,
very overwhelming experience. Um, and from then it was a series of those kind of, what it's like. You just feel like this huge experiment that everyone's,
mm.
you know.
So they were still trying to figure out what's truly wrong with you?
Well, they weren't sure if I'd had a hemorrhage. So
Uh,
so the thing at that
mm,
point, they really didn't know exactly what they were looking at. So they sent me down to John Hunter. I had the femoral angiogram, which found out I have a disease called fibromuscular dysplasia. Have you
mm.
heard of that?
Have not
No.
heard.
It's a rare disease of your arteries. And so what happens, it's to do with genetics and what have you, that, well, they think it's so rare they're still researching, but to do with the lamination layers and cells inside of the arteries, and they develop this webbing. um, so in my carotid arteries here, I have 50 to 69% blockage in both, and they're like
Oh,
a
wow.
string of pearls instead of a smooth tube. So they're like these little pearls.
Oh.
And then I have a section in my brain, and then my right renal artery. So it can happen in any artery in your body, and it makes you prone or predisposes you to aneurysms anywhere in your body,
Mm,
arterial dissections. A lot of women have what's called a SCAD heart attack, which is spontaneous coronary artery dissection. So their coronary artery dissects. So they're doing research. We've just had a doctor who's Australian, but he's been working, I think, in Cleveland,
mm,
at a big research hospital or some sort of hospital over there that's doing a lot of research into it. He's come back to Sydney, Australia, and working now with another research project in our heart. He's actually a cardiologist. So I'm actually going to go and visit him and see him and get put on our, research register and all of that sort of stuff. So I found out about that, but the doctors kind of pushed that to the side at this point because it was all focused on the brain.
mm.
Mm.
Um, so basically, I had two aneurysms here. Um, so that's two, and I've got two this side, and then I've got one um, at the back of my brain, um, which is inoperable, but if the time ever comes where we need to maybe have to do something, they're hoping they can do um, an angiogram or some sort of artery procedure through my arm up into there.
Oh, like a bypass?
Yes, or a flow diverter or some
Mm,
sort of thing to, open it up. But
Mm.
that one's kind of the ticking time bomb. So it hasn't been addressed. The one they addressed, so I went in for surgery. I was in John Hunter for probably, I think, 5 days initially, and then they sent me home for about 8 weeks. prior to surgery. And it took them and the reason I was in there 5 days initially was because it took them that long to decide what to do with me, because I'm kind of relatively young, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the size of the aneurysm at that point in time, they did a lot of video call-ups with other neurosurgeons to decide, because all of the neurologist radio interventionalists, I think they're called, the ones who do the coiling and things through your arteries, they're sort of like, let's go down that path. And all the surgeons are like, no, we want to go down the surgery path. And so they all eventually decided upon surgery would be my best option, because it is a more permanent thing, and there's less risk, as in the coiling may rupture eventually anyway. So it was more of a, this is a better situation for you. So I had 8 weeks to go home and think about it, which was kind of scary, because they go to great detail to tell you what's going to happen in 8 weeks. So, we're going to cut your head from here to here. We're going to take that bone off. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. So you're kind of like, okay. For me, I kind of let it wash over me and went into that mode of, I don't really want to think about that part of it. So I started drawing and painting.
Okay.
My husband and my daughter, meanwhile, were probably like your husband and just researching the heck out of it, and then just getting more and more and more anxious about the whole thing. And I'm kind of like, I don't want to know. I don't really want to see somebody else having breast surgery. I don't want to know about it.
Yeah.
So I kind of buried my head in the sand, and I mean, they're quite open. They tell you the big risks involved, but really there's no option at that point, because it's kind of like this knife edge of what, is that outcome better than this outcome, which, it cannot be in a lot of cases. So, so that was hard, waiting that 8 weeks. And then we went back for the surgery, which was just another ordeal in itself. So, because I spent a month in hospital, but yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine waiting
8
weeks. I mean,
8
even
weeks
just
is long. Even 2 weeks is long. 8 weeks is like a
yeah.
year.
Well, for Kathy, we had to wait a day because it was, when they told me kind of the surgery plan, they said, we're gonna, well, we'll do it tomorrow morning. I said,
Yeah.
why are you waiting tomorrow morning? And one of the doctors kind of put it this way. They said, well, would you rather have a surgery team that's been up all day and tired, and like the night shift where we're kind of short staffed, or do you want everybody fresh in the morning? And they're like, she'll be okay for a few hours. So because I was like, don't you need to fix this right now? So yeah, it was kind of like that. But then
And that's where it is. It's so hard on the people around you
yeah.
looking in. I think from my perspective, I don't know about yours, but Kathy, but from my perspective, it was just getting through every minute and hour of every day, doing what had to be done. Whereas your family tend to see it from the other side, and it's more of a worry for them.
I don't know if your husband was like this, but I started watching YouTube videos of craniotomies, and her
Yes.
niece had to tell me, "Why are you why are you watching that stuff? Stop."
Yes.
So I had to kind of stop, and so yeah, so
They were the same. My daughter was the same. He and my daughter would be, unbeknownst to me, watching all these things, and it was. I think I one day on my own flicked YouTube on and thought, oh, maybe I should get prepared here. And I kind of, it's a bit like when you're pregnant and you watch someone giving birth. It's kind of like, I have to do that. I don't really want to watch somebody else doing it at this point in time, type thing. And I kind of, like, initially when I saw their head getting screwed onto the table, and then the table you have on a swing table, so your bodies just can go anywhere they want because they need to get access. And I was like, oh my God, I really don't need to see this.
Yeah.
I kind of abstained. But I must admit, in the few days leading up to it, I did actually sort of start to think, oh, I need to get a bit serious here about this. And so I did actually, but I was more kind of interested in what you guys are doing, is hearing other people talking about what had happened to them. So there was a few people on YouTube who were there discussing what had happened to them post surgery, and as far as physical things, and and mentally as well, I suppose, but mainly physical things about walking, talking, and all of those kind of things. So, and as I say, the neurology team were really great. They have like the surgeon, he was a bit oh, let me say, how can I put it delicately? He was a bit of an arrogant pig, but very abrupt. And I kind of went home for 8 weeks thinking, oh my goodness. And I'm Googling neurosurgeons. Do I need to get a second opinion? I'm really not too sure about this. I think this is, wrong. Anyway, I finally did a bit of research, and John Hunter Hospital is kind of the place where other states send their brain aneurysm people, because it's state of the art, and I kind of had to learn to calm down. And his reviews and his references were great. So I thought, well, really, do I care about his personality? Probably not, as long as he knows what he's doing type thing. And bedside manner, none whatsoever. And to the point he may have been, in hindsight, maybe a bit autistic. I don't know. He was kind of a bit, very focused on his job. And but his team of young girls and that around him, whatever they're called, these young people that work for them, they were amazing. Told me every single detail, and so it was kind of, I was prepared, and then I was prepared for the adverse effects that may happen. And I mean, that could be anything from I die there, because it hemorrhages on the table and I die, to nothing happens to you at all, So in that slide scale, I suppose I'm happy now. It's kind of, life's different, but it's also better in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
So what was the procedure? What was the actual procedure that they performed?
So I had a craniotomy on the right side. So the incision was from the top of, or sort of maybe over this side a bit more, followed kind of, well, it was inside of my hairline. They shaved quite a fair chunk of hair off here, and then the incision went down here, down past the back of my ear, and then around, and then that piece of skull was taken off.
Wow.
And then they do the surgery basically, and then when they were in there, they found another aneurysm that we didn't even know about, what's called a blister. So it's kind of the beginning of an aneurysm. It was quite close proximity, so they thought, well, we may as well clip this one. So the clips are kind of like little clothespins, and so now I've got 2 clips in there. And then the bone goes back, and that can actually be one of the biggest risks at the end, is the bone taking, and not, because if you have problems with that, then you could be in a lot of drama then for the next few years, trying to get your skull to grow back, adhere back. And having plates and helmets and things. So it was kind of, the day was very surreal to me, because I'd never really had an operation, apart from I had a emergency cesarean with my daughter. But I mean, that was kind of a bit like you, Kathy. It's kind of like, I don't have time to think about this. It's just happening.
I had an emergency. I had an emergency C-section for the twins. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's another story. But yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. 10 weeks early. Maddie was a buck, like a pound,
less than 2 pounds,
like a pound 13 ounces, and our son was 3 pounds 3 ounces. But anyways, yes.
Well, we do have this in common, because I have twin sisters. They're identical mirror twins, and they were born, I think about 12 weeks early back in the day, and they're like in their 50s now. So this is back in the day, pre, all the medicine that we have now. And basically they weren't weighed, because they were so tiny. They were less than 2 pounds each, and that was a long drama story. But anyway, they're fine.
So what do you remember from waking up?
Well, my main memory from the surgery is actually the pre-op.
Oh.
Because when I went in there, I kind of had this, I don't know, you imagine what it's going to look like from watching, probably American medical shows.
Yeah, like Grey's Anatomy. I'm a huge fan. Yeah,
a
right?
house or something that's kind of like going to look like this. And it didn't quite look like that. I felt like I was taken to, because the bed they put you on is a very narrow bed for some reason. I don't know why. But and then I was taken into what I would call the broom closet. It wasn't, but it felt like I was taken into the broom closet or something to, where they keep the cleaning materials or something. It's just this tiny little hole. And you have all of these people working on you at the same time. And there's so many things because they're dealing with your arteries and your brain. They have to maintain your blood pressure every 3 seconds, or like they've got to keep it monitored every so many seconds. So you have an arterial line in your feet. You have arterial lines in your arms. I think I had something happening in my neck. So they're having to do these while I'm awake. And they couldn't find arteries, so then they had to bring ultrasound machines in to try and find my artery. I think I was so scared by this point they all shrunk and went away. I don't know.
Wow.
So by this point, I felt like every single like there was 10 people in there just prodding me and poking me, and I was getting so distraught by the end of it, but trying not to show it. Where I'm thinking, oh my goodness, like this is just so. And then the enormity of it hit me. Like the enormity of it hit me when I passed through the doors and had to say goodbye to my daughter and my husband. That was when I kind of went, and they were crying their eyes out, and it was kind of like, we're going to be the same when we see each other again. And it was kind of like, that was when I kind of thought, keep your shit together, Cheryl. And but I just wanted to bawl my eyes out. And so then you endure an hour or so of this, what's called torture, really. and then that's it. Waking up is your question. My first thing on waking up was screaming, and I remember a light, and I felt like I was screaming my lungs out, but I was in this dreamlike state. And then I just remember people slapping me in the face saying, wake up, wake up. And I had a male nurse, and he had a big beard, and to my eyes this beard looked like it was a bit, I was on drugs. But apparently I had been screaming. And they couldn't wake me up, but I wouldn't stop screaming. So it was kind of traumatic to hear that, really, because I internally had felt the screams, if you know what I mean, but I didn't feel the outside of my body. It was a kind of strange experience. Yeah. So basically, the ICU was just a blur. I woke up to what my husband described as, it looked like Mike Tyson had put me in the ring and beaten the crap out of me. Which I wasn't expecting, because when I'd been in John Hunter the first time initially, there was a lady there who'd had a similar surgery, and she was, I think, 2 weeks post-op at that point. But she looked perfectly fine, like she could go shopping or something. And I'm sort of had that vision in my head, but I didn't look anything like that. I looked nothing like that. I was bruised. I was swollen. My eye was out here. My face had dropped like I'd had a stroke. This bit was like, it was pretty ugly. They had scrunched my hair up with this, I think they must drench your body with this stuff, like, antibacterial stuff. But it sets like a bit like concrete. So I had this big kind of powder puff thing sticking out of the side of my head here from my hair that was crinkly to touch, and it had to stay like that for 2 weeks because I wasn't allowed to shower.
And I remember that.
So basically my eyes were closed. I couldn't open my eyes.
Wow.
So I think for the first 4 or 5 days, eventually I could sort of see little slits of people. The first couple of days I really don't remember a lot. But then obviously he drugged a lot, heavy drugs. But one of my first best memories in the hospital when they finally took me to the ward was they wanted me to try and eat, but because of the surgery, my jaw wouldn't. You have this problem with your jaw, and it kind of lasted about 10 months, where my right jaw didn't work properly. It was very hard to kind of open my mouth and do things. And I remember my daughter went into the staff room and she made me a piece of toast and she crumbled it up and she kept putting it on my tongue so I could just sort of basically, suck the toast. And it's one of the best memories I have. It was kind of so beautiful that she was just doing this, And basically it was, I think, the first 10 days of different members of my family taking watch over me and rubbing cream in my hands and doing all of those beautiful things to help me. One of the twins is a nurse, and so she's quite practical. So she was, doing a lot of stuff for me. But it was pretty big ordeal, really, when I look back at it.
No, that was oh my gosh. Now when I go back to my story, we've interviewed what? You're our fourth? And
Yeah.
I have to admit, now when I look back at my story, it's like, ugh, it was nothing. Meaning
Oh no.
no, meaning in the sense where I was like, "Holy crap." I thought I had it pretty bad in terms of, like I
Yeah.
was gonna die, I can't believe I'm
Yeah.
still alive, but I think from your perspective, it just seems so much harder because you actually knew you were
Had
gonna
to
go
live.
into surgery, right?
Yeah,
And
that
I
probably
have
was
to
some.
say
Yeah.
yeah, and of course, your description of your in terms of waking up and physically being, impaired at the time, I
Yeah.
gosh, I look back at my photos and I'm like, "Yeah, I was swollen, but not to the degree that you and other, survivors that I've met." I
Yeah.
mean,
And
I'm not trying to make light of what happened to me or, and what
gosh,
you and other aneurysm survivors have gone through, but I just feel like in a way, maybe I was meant to not be conscious because I don't know, I just don't feel like I'm that confident in myself in term of my mental strength.
mm,
And
mm,
I that's the same thing when it comes to my training and when I run and whatnot. But
yeah,
I have to give it up to you and so many of the survivors that we've interviewed is that mentally you guys are just you all have such gr- tremendous mental um strength,
yeah.
to power through,
I
and
don't know.
what you were describing your daughter, uh, making these little morsels for you to enjoy and
Yeah,
people watching over you. I think that's the only thing that I can connect with is that, those small acts of kindness is what is what I really truly remember. And I'm glad that, at
yeah.
least you have that too,
And
you
I
know?
think too, the whole experience for me is enveloped in a bubble of love
Mhm.
because it's so true what people say. It's only at times like that you realize how much people love you, um, and want to help you and want to
Mhm.
look after you,
Yeah.
and it's quite overwhelming when you're the recipient. So many family, flowers and gifts and um, like my twin sisters, they both took a week off of holidays from their employment, their job. My sister's a nurse and the other one works with disabled people, and they just sat with me every single day into the night and reminisced over our childhood. I've never laughed so much, even though I couldn't laugh because of my jaw. They bought, it's kind of like, what do you really want, Cheryl? I went, I want a cloud for my head, because it was so hard to get my head comfortable. So they went out shopping to buy me a cloud. Like, they found this pillow.
That's
like
so beautiful. That's so awesome.
And just all these little things. And they just basically, and then I think it was about the 12th or 14th day, I was allowed to shower, to wash my hair. At that point, I'd been able to go with a nurse and sit on the chair and have a shower. But I had a few complications. So when I was in ICU, the ICU nurse had said to my husband and my daughter, it looks like she had a bleed when she was in surgery. And that's the only time I've ever heard about that. Nobody mentioned it to me. When I got all my surgical notes, because I was then having to deal with my, insurer for my work insurance and things, I did see mention of something about a hemorrhage. And apparently I had two. One was within the brain, and then one when they, the coating on the brain, I think it's called the dura or something, the dural, or some sort of lining on top of the brain. When that was back intact, I then had a hemorrhage between where your bone and that goes. I don't know how that works. So I was really not aware of that. And then now my brain's kicked in and forgotten what I was saying.
So did that affect?
It just goes. It's like, oh my goodness.
So how did that
Yes,
affect
so
you?
I had,
Yeah.
I had a couple of conflicts. So basically, when I went back to my bed, I was bedridden, like on the bed. So I had, how you would have had the shower. They do all the washing of you and all of that kind of stuff, the nurses. And then they decided, today you need to stand up. And I think it was about the fourth day maybe. And so they sort of got me and lifted me up and then turned me around. And as I put my left or right leg out, lifted it up to go to the ground, I just had the most immense pain I've ever had. It was excruciating. So they put me back on the bed, took me to the ultrasound. I don't know what you call them. Do you call them ultrasounds?
Like the
sonograph. Yes, scanning. So I had a pseudoaneurysm happen in my leg where they had done the femoral, because pre-op and post-op, I had to have femoral angiograms. And the first one, which was initially when I went to John Hunter, and to be fair to everyone involved, they didn't realise at that point that I had this fibromuscular dysplasia, which does make my arteries fragile. So the first time they did the angiogram in my leg to sort of really get a picture of what was going on, what they do is they kind of sit on you to hold it down to close that artery off and stop it bleeding, which it did. And then you go down to recovery, and in recovery it hemorrhaged, and I was just transfusion basically. And so they had to put this medieval clamp around my body and clamp it onto there, and for like 6 hours they put the pressure down, and then for 3 hours they take the pressure off. And so basically I'd had that happen on one leg, and then after my surgery 8 weeks later I had another angiogram, because they need to check that your arteries aren't vasospasming or something like that. And so when they went to get me out of bed, I had the pain. I went and had the scan, and I developed basically a dissection or a pseudoaneurysm in that site. So then I was bedridden then for another week. I couldn't get out of bed because they had to then put more pressure on that, and then I had to not move, so then I'm laying there trying not to move my legs. And so that was kind of that. And so there was a couple of things like that. I had another incident when I went to the bathroom for the first time on my own one night. I wasn't meant to go by myself, but they were so busy and the nurses weren't there. And this young girl came from the office and I said, look, just you walk me, I'll be fine. And of course I wasn't fine. And next thing I know, I must have been passing out, but there was a buzzer next to the toilet and I must have just been unconsciously just pushing this buzzer. And next thing I know, the whole little toilet cubicle's full of nurses and what have you. And I'm sitting on the toilet. I was like, oh my goodness, like how bad can this get? So that was another, like I was vomiting into the waste paper basket.
Oh wow.
You
So
were a hot mess when you were there.
I was a hot mess, but my best memory is on the 14th day, they said I could wash my hair. So by then my crackling nest had just got to the point I thought my hair's just going to snap off. And so my sister, who's the nurse, I said to the other nurses, can she do it? And they said, yeah, look, that's fine. So we had a couple of chairs in there because I couldn't really stand up. And she lovingly gave me a shower and washed my hair. And it was then I truly appreciated her profession as a nurse, because to her it's something she does every single day for people. But for me, she did it and she just knew how to have everything laid out so that it was so easy for me to she could put things back on me properly, you know. And I don't know, it was just such an experience. I'll never forget it. It's kind of like one of those memories in my mind of I will be ever grateful for her for that shower. Yeah. Like it was just the most amazing experience, and to never underestimate how good a shower makes you feel.
Right. I know. And you mentioned you ended up picking up drawing.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
have you always is that what you've always done? Or you were just like a dabbler? Like
I've always been creative. And I love art. I've always been an art lover. So if we travel anywhere, the first place we go to is the art gallery, or we repurpose things, or I make things, or whether it's anything from crocheting to painting to sculpting. So particularly up to the end of high school, that's kind of one of the things I always wanted to do was art. And I, you know, did really well in my art major at the end. And then, of course, like that was back in the late 70s. And it's kind of like, you know, you need to, you know, my dad had me earmarked for university and medicine because I was also really academic. And so times were a little bit different back then. I mean, I'm nearly 60 and it's kind of like girls, I don't know, it was a bit of a different world. There was secretarial college and there was this and there was that, or you went to uni and did this. So I ended up becoming a dental nurse, of all things, and did that for 12 years. But all the time in my life, I've always picked up, you know, I might go and do an art workshop or something like that. And then I always had in the back of my head this dream of, you know, one day when I retire, I just want a little backyard studio. I just want to be able to sit and paint and just create, you know. Careful what you wish for, because it does happen in mysterious ways. And so basically when I had the 8 weeks, I just needed to be, my daughter had me on this kind of diet of, you know, brain foods and everything that's going to make me really healthy. And I thought, well, you know, I do need to make sure I'm in tip-top condition to give myself the best chance. And then I thought I need to relax as well. And the only thing that my brain wanted to do was to draw and paint. So next to my window over here, I set up a little table. And I only had a few art supplies. I think people gave me some stuff and I just started doing some watercolors and what have you. And basically it got to the point that's what I did all day, every day. Art.
That was like your therapy, right?
That was my therapy. Yeah. And then when I came out of hospital, I was kind of like, the first week at home was a little bit weird. It was kind of like being in a foreign place, if that makes sense. It was kind of, it was the middle of winter. It was really cold. And all my brain wanted to do every single day was paint and do art. And it got to the point that on YouTube, the only thing I watch is art tutorials and artists. And it basically consumed. It was kind of like I just didn't feel right if I didn't paint or draw. Like I just, it was a compulsion. I don't know. It was kind of the only way I could keep my brain calm, if you know what I mean, or keep my brain pathways in some sort of orderly fashion, because they'd completely gone out of whack. But of course, the first 6 months I was recovering at home, and then so I had my surgery, I think it was in May, and then I think in December, against my doctor's wishes, I said, I need to go back to work. Like, I can't be slow. I've been away from my job for too long. And I decided to go back to work early. And so the first day I went back to work and I sat at my desk, and I kind of felt so strange. I felt so, I don't know. I felt like I was on another planet. And by the end of the day, I ended up in hospital with blood pressure of 200 over 120. And it was kind of like, okay, so let's try this just, 2 days a week, 3 hours a day, and see how you go. So I tried that for a few months. But I don't know about your careers, but mine, it was like, that's just never going to happen, because as soon as the young people know you're back, it's kind of like they don't realize, they know what you've been through, but they don't realize the impact that it's had on you. So to me, I'm still the mentor, go-to person that knows everything. And Cheryl, like constantly, can you help me with this? Can I do, what's this? How do you find this out? And one day I actually turned around to one of the young ones and said, do you know what? I'm not actually really smart. I'm not smarter than you. I'm just smart enough to know where to look for the answer while you're asking me the question. Like, I know, you know what I mean? I said, I don't walk around with the Australian tax law in my head. I don't walk around with all of the tax rules in my head. I don't walk around with all the corporate rules in my head. So I just know I've learned how to find the answer to what I'm looking for. And if you really need to, you can too. So basically I had to stop work because it got too much for my blood pressure. My blood pressure kept going quite erratic, to the point I was really low where I couldn't stand up, or I was really high and pre-stroke. And so we thought, let's give it a bit longer. So by then we had gotten to 2020, and I went back to work in February of 2020.
Oh gosh.
And it was getting a bit full on. And then next thing I know, COVID hit.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they brought into Australia this thing called Job Seeker, which was a government initiative to help us get through this, whereby they were paying everybody, I think it was 720 or 750 Australian dollars a week, I think it was, or a fortnight or something, just to keep everyone paid and in the workforce, because businesses were restaurants were closed. It was just horrific. So all of a sudden, 3/4 of the country are getting wages paid by the government. But with that, from an accounting perspective, comes all of the different legislation and the hoops you have to jump through and how it's going to work. And the government would put things out every 24 hours. And so it was my job and one of the other ladies' jobs. We had to try and keep on top of that. So every day I had to do webinars and training to try and keep ahead of our clients, so we could, because some of them have huge wage lists, so you've got to make sure that they're all got their I's dotted and ticked and whatever. And we then had to work from home. So all of a sudden I've got 2 computers on my art desk, and I'm getting out of bed in my dressing gown at the desk, So all of a sudden clients had my phone number. They had access to me where they hadn't had it for the last 8 months. And one day I was sitting there and I wrote an email to one of our clients who was a surgeon, and it took me about an hour to write an email. And when I read it, I thought, it doesn't even make sense. And I realized that my reading ability wasn't what it used to be. I couldn't connect the lines across properly, which is now why I have yellow glasses. Everything was jumbled to me. Everything was so much harder for me. Whereas before it was just compute. Now it was kind of like, this is so hard. And one day I burst out crying in front of my computer. And my husband came home. I was still in my pajamas. It was, I'd done a whole day. I was meant to be doing 2 hours a day. And I said, I don't think I can do accounting anymore. I'm so scared I'm going to make a mistake that I'm having to recheck all the time. So I spent all of my day rechecking my work because I was so scared to make a mistake that I knew I was going to make. And when you're talking with millions of dollars, I don't want to make that mistake for somebody. So it was kind of like I had to have a meeting with my employers and sort of say, look, I don't think I can do this anymore. Now, my employer loves me to pieces and would, give me a job licking envelopes if that's what it took to just keep me there. You know what I mean? Like, he just really wanted to keep me there. And I said, look, well, I won't leave, but I'll just be on leave, And so that started my journey, but I've never been back. I think I may have gone back a couple of times in the office when the office reopened to try, but I realised my brain doesn't quite compute the same as it did before. And I have a few issues with, I can't drive anymore. That was probably one of the hardest things. And so, yeah, there's been a big lot of life changes that's happened to me, and my corporate life was one of them. And that probably took me a couple of years of grieving to get out. It's probably over the last 12 months that I've realised I'm an artist, not an accountant.
That's why I wanted to talk to you and meet you. And by the
I
way,
agree.
Cheryl is from Australia, so thank you, technology. And so I just wanted people to see, like, there's you have to find that silver lining. And I'm so happy that you have that, at least. Not
Would
a
you
lot
know
of people are lucky, but
no, exactly. And I think I'm really, really lucky. I have a great, I'm not sure what you call it, but just your general doctor. We call it our GP, general practitioner, that you go to. And she kind of, has become my friend. And the first words, I mean, she had no idea what was happening to me at the time until when we rang and said, look, Cheryl's on her way home. We need to see you within 48 hours, blah, blah, blah. So from that moment, she's been one of my greatest people. And the first words out of her mouth to me were, I want you to go home and do what brings you joy. And that stuck in my head for so long. Like, it's still now. I think every day, do what brings you joy. And I say it a lot to other people now because I kind of feel, you sort of think, would you do that again to get to here? You probably wouldn't choose to do it that way, no. But having said that, I'm not unhappy now that it did happen. I mean, I now know what's happening. I've got ticking time bombs. There's 3 more there. I've got this disease. Like, I do know there's other things going on, and I just deal with them. Like, that's like popping up things and putting hammers to them as they come up. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't be in this place, in my studio. I wouldn't have met, like, I was just in an exhibition for the first time, which is something I never would have thought would have happened. I went to an artist meet and greet, and she said, look, I'm doing this mentorship with a business course. It goes for 8 weeks. I think you'd be a great fit. Come along. And I'm like, oh, gee, really? Because I have to rely on people to take me places. Our public transport's not great. And I did it just on the spur of the moment. I went, yes, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to actually because I have become because I don't drive, I kind of love my serenity and my own space. So I can sort of go a week or more, or 2 or 3 sometimes, without, maybe someone might pop in, but I may not go anywhere type thing. And I've become quite in my own bubble, in my garden and my art studio, if you know what I mean, and just living very quietly. So I thought, no, okay, put yourself out there, do it. So I did, and twice a week I went to this, and the end result was we were putting on an exhibition in the local art gallery. And so the last 4 weeks of that were just a whirlwind for me, because I was literally painting from dawn till midnight, trying to get these paintings done. And the mentor, I think I was meant to do it because the mentor came to my house, and she had a sorry, my brain doesn't work sometimes. She had a session with me looking at all my work, and she's kind of like, what are you doing hiding in this studio? Like, you need to, these are great. And I'm like, oh, but, I'm not a proper artist. I'm not I haven't been to art school. I'm not a proper one. Anyway, she left me with a task to do with putting some, stuff in front of me, and just don't think, put some music on and just let it flow. So I thought, okay. So on my wall here, I taped up some big substrates, and I put the music on, and all of a sudden just stuff came flooding out of me. It was just kind of like, I didn't even think about it. I knew what it was going to be about. I knew everything about it. And it was just a whirlwind from then till the exhibition morning, when I was still touching up, still trying to get them in frames. And I sold 2 out of the 3 the first night. So it was kind of like a bit of validation. Do you know what? You can actually do this. You can exhibit. You can sell. So I'm in the process of setting up a website and putting my work online, and just kind of being brave, and just and that's, I don't know about you, Kathy, but are you a bit braver in some ways, in some things? Like, I'm very shy and kind of person, but now I'm kind of like, it could be old age, it could be 60 going, like, you're only here for another 20 years or more, just do it type thing. I don't know. It could be
Well,
a bit
I
of
mean, I
that.
think part of it is like, oh, I almost died. So what the heck?
Yeah, how bad can it
What could
get?
happen? How could it be worse, right?
Exactly.
Exactly.
But what I would like for you to say is this okay? I am a fill in the blank.
I am an artist. Exactly. I know. That was one of our tasks we had to do at our business mentoring sheet. We had to actually say what you were. And I actually stood up and said it. And I was kind of like, because in my brain I'd been rehearsing, well, I'm an accountant who's now doing art. Like, I had all these other descriptions for myself. And then in the end I went, do you know what? I'm just an artist now. I'm not an accountant.
It takes a huge village to be
Oh,
able
absolutely.
to do what you want to do, because
Yeah.
a lot of times I think when I was recovering, I felt like a burden. I felt like I was such a burden,
Oh, absolutely.
you're like, oh, because I was
Yes.
very independent, and for someone to have to
Yes.
care for you and just watch
Oh,
you, but also, like I
absolutely.
said, with the whole, see, I went adrift a little bit, but what I was trying to say is that with this village, um, I'm really lucky to have Rob be,
Mm,
to create, to help. Well, he was actually the one that created We Run With You. And it wasn't to be a nonprofit. It was
yeah.
really just a community to share stories like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Survivors would write, their stories, and
And maybe that's how I first, because I think I started following you because when I first, in that first 8 weeks, my daughter set me up. I was very anti um, social media. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have Instagram. I didn't have anything like that. And it's kind of like, no, I don't need it. I'm on the computer all day. I don't need that kind of. And when I got sick, she basically set me up with Instagram. I didn't have Facebook at that point, but Instagram, so that my mum and my sisters, because we live sort of in different areas, we could all sort of keep, family could keep in touch, and we could see photos and things like that. And it would be something for me to look at. And so that's how I first started. So, of course, the first thing I did was look up, fibromuscular dysplasia and brain aneurysms and all sorts of things. And there's one young girl in Germany, Victoria, who I started to follow. And she's, for such a young girl, she's had such a hard story. Like her story is along our lines, but a different one again. And then there's another lady in America, Cynthia, who had some issues with, so started, just little chats here and there. And so there was all this sort of other groups of people that became involved, and I think that's where you popped up, maybe as a survivor story or something. And it's like, oh, similar person follow, kind of.
Yeah.
Which is probably how I then became part of your universe. And I used to have on my Instagram, I think I was just, because we had this sort of policy at our work where, your personal life and your work computer life was two separate things. And so I didn't actually have my real name on there. I had Marie, which is my middle name, and my maiden name. And I had accounting art and aneurysms or something. That was my little tagline. So over the years, the accounting and the aneurysms have gone, and it's just art now, because I feel like I need to keep going ahead, so yeah. So,
that's awesome.
But that's that was how we would have crossed paths, I think.
Well, it's very hard, I think, for people to realize or to take that time to do what your soul needs. And sometimes it's hard for us to find, but we're so busy with what we need to accomplish in our
Absolutely,
life or in our careers that we don't even stop to think about what
we have our homes and
what
our
we need.
mortgages and it's all sort of
Yeah, and sometimes it takes something drastic like a brain aneurysm to push you to that direction.
It does. And I think that it kind of not only you does it give that perspective to, but those around you get that perspective as well. And it's kind of like a blessing, if you can put it that way. It's kind of like, to have someone in your life who's nearly died or had something very traumatic. I mean, in 1998, I lost my younger sister to a car accident. She was sort of in the lead up to Christmas Eve, and she was on her way to my house. Anyway, she had a car accident and she died. That was I suppose, the pinnacle of life-changing moments for our family. And, all these years later, you kind of look at it and go, it was the worst thing that happened in our life, but it was one of also a best thing that happened in our life in some respects, as far as the rest of us being a cohesive, loving family, if you know what I mean. Like, it taught us what family and love was. You definitely wouldn't want to do that to get to that point, but it's just such a life-changing experience. You can't explain it. And I feel that was what came out of my soul for the exhibition. I feel it was all grief, loss, and love. That's what came out. At the moment, I think my brain's coming out, because I'm starting to draw all these women with I don't know if you can actually see that. Like, they kind of got like the brainy type heads and stuff. So there's a whole kind of series coming out now. So I think I'm on my next trauma.
Okay.
And my next trauma's coming out. So.
But you heard it here, folks. We interviewed Cheryl Art first, and if she becomes super famous, she'll do a shout out to us every single time.
Yeah, and having said that, when you said, like, I think I actually have come to think that that's so true. Like, I'm now on my path that I should have been on all along. But it took me that to get here. It was kind of like, I don't know, is it?
You just took a really long detour.
is it the universe? Is it, you know, whatever you believe in?
Yeah.
Is it that knocks you on the head and you don't listen? So then it knocks you again and you don't listen. So then eventually it does something. So you go, I'm going to stop and listen now. And so I think that's what's happened. And I'm now on the path that I'm meant to be on, because I feel like there's something in here that needs to come out that I haven't yet got out. Like, I think there's an artwork in there that will happen.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm hoping I recognize it when I paint it, and I don't paint over it. I tend to sometimes paint over things. Yeah, so I don't know. Who knows?
Well,
We have a big.
I for
Yeah. Anyway.
one, so grateful that you decided to share your art and put it out there, because I did get, look through your collection on Instagram, and the first thought in my mind was that they were powerful images, and it
Yeah.
just, and it, for me, it was, emotional, and I think, you can give that to people by sharing your art.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's where the bravery comes in, because the old me would never have posted a drawing or a painting on. I would have, shuddered at the thought. And I still, when I'll take photos of my artwork or whatever, and then I go, I'll post it. There's still that hesitation before I hit post or share, where I go, oh no, don't do it. And then I go, what the heck? And I do it. And I go, oh no, and then I have these 15 minutes of kind of going, oh no, but that's the bravery for me, is the sharing of it. But the thing with art is, if you don't share it, it's nothing really, is it? Like, it's nothing. And when I did my exhibition paintings, I knew what they meant to me. They were full of grief, loss, and love. And my mentor said that if you paint, you do that, she said, in the hope and in the knowledge that we're all on this human journey, and we all have our own experiences, and we all have our own things happening in our life. And someone will look at your artwork and it will touch something in their journey. And you just have to have faith that will happen, because that's the place that you've made it from, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, you've created it from that place. And so I hung them up, and it was kind of like people were just responding to them. And then I delivered. It was quite a wait between the end of the exhibition. I sent them in to be photographed, and then I delivered them to the lady and to say thank you. My first sale, I bought a bunch of flowers and had a handmade card for her, and I unwrapped them for her, and she started to cry. And she said, and she hadn't even seen them in person. She'd only seen a photo of them, and she bought them, and they were quite big. And she started crying, and her story was, we had some devastating floods here about 18 months to 2 years ago, and her house was completely flooded. She'd lost everything, and she was in temporary accommodation in a hotel, whatever you call it, for about 12 months. And she developed a bit of post-traumatic stress from it, and then her house had to be rebuilt, and it was the house she grew up in, and her mother had died there and all that sort of stuff. So it was very traumatic for her to lose everything. And as soon as she had seen one of my paintings, she said, she looked at the photo and went, oh, that's me, I've been there. And in that place. And then when she saw the others, she sort of went, well, I can't have that one without that one, because they sort of kind of go together. And so basically that's why she bought it. And then when I gave them to her, she started crying, and she said, this is the first thing I've bought for myself ever, as just for me personally, as a gift to myself type thing. So I thought, wow, is that why we do this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
that's powerful.
I want to make somebody else feel like
Yeah.
that.
I mean,
I
look
want
at
to make,
how see, look at a lot of people are like, I want to be like you and Rob and make a difference. And I'm like, no, you don't want to be like us. You can just be you and make a
and
difference.
make a
And your
difference.
artwork is making a difference. And just to,
Yeah.
you know, take it one step in terms of when you asked me about, do you feel like you're more brave? I don't know. I think that's still a question that I will have to answer later. But in terms of for you, I feel like, you know, it's good that you're vulnerable though. Because you know how you're like you have to pause when you hit the post on your artwork and
Mm.
stuff.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's just really good though that you
And,
that you
and
are
I still,
vulnerable. And in order for you to I think in order for you to be brave, you have to first be vulnerable and understand that, yeah, this scares me.
um, as far as surviving goes, it's kind of like one of those things. Everyone has a different survival journey, but it's it, my thing is, don't think about it, just survive. Really, don't think too deeply about it, because everyone around you will do all the thinking for you and the deep emotional stuff. Just keep going one day at a time, every minute, every hour. Just enjoy every moment of that recovery, because it will happen. You will recover, or you'll find your path or your place. It's hard to put into words, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I think
So,
that's the perfect place to end it.
Hmm.
End it there. And I just really want to think I can speak for Kathy to say thank you so much for
thank
sharing your
you.
story. It's been for me. It's I'm grateful to hear it and
Thank you.
grateful to
I'm
have seen your art. So keep sharing it, please. And to listeners, you could see Cheryl's art on her Instagram. Her Instagram tag
Yes,
is right there
please.
under her
Yeah.
video. So
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you so much.
More to come. Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. It's been so wonderful.
We Run With You is a nonprofit with a mission to improve the lives of people suffering from brain injury and disease by funding research, raising awareness, and providing support for survivors and their families. Find out more at werunwithyou.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a comment or review. Until next time, keep doing good.